Hello and welcome to episode 107 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm the father of the most beautiful beast in the world, Jerry. And we are coming off of Play the Best Plays week 1. Yes, that's right. If you played the best plays, you likely had a good week. We talked all last week about Davante Adams being like the biggest layup of the slate at 7,300. We had him projected for the most targets on the entire slate. He goes for a 44 ball. Josh Jacobs, the conversation started there, running back. He goes for 36 points. Alvin Kamara's pass game role in the matchup against Tampa, he runs into 24 points. A little lucky with touchdowns, but he runs into 24 points. Lamar Jackson kind of waltzes to his 27. Atlanta pass game goes ham. Russ goes ham. Thielen goes ham. Josh Allen, of course. The god, Josh Allen, of course, goes ham. Mark Andrews, easy, right? Easy game. Of course. There were some decisions to be made as we couldn't possibly fit all those guys in our lineups. And that's where things get interesting or got interesting. Before I get into more here, though, I wanted to remind everyone that we do have weekly and monthly options available on the site, as well as full season. All of them get access to everything we do, all the articles, projections, shows, top plays. So head to EstablishTheRun.com to check it out if you are interested. Okay, so let me start with cash and let me start with Antonio Gibson. I think in a vacuum, right? Just should you be playing Antonio Gibson in cash in this spot? Clearly a mistake. It's just really rare that we want to use a precious running back spot on a third round rookie who we knew would be in a committee on a team with a severe offensive line, defensive line mismatch. And what I try to do after a slate, when evaluating my play is look at usage, of course, right? And Antonio Gibson, he did get stuffed on one goal line carry, but he only played on 18 out of 70 snaps, only handled 31% of the running back carries. Only saw 6.5% of his team's targets. I mean, it's really, really bad to use a running back with that kind of usage in a cash lineup. And I knew that weak usage was in the range of outcomes for Gibson, very much so. One thing that I've worked on over the last few years is when I tell myself this guy is an egregious play in tournaments, the field is way too high on him, they're way overconfident in him, then I really try to not play him in cash. And that was the case on Gibson, right? I made 10 GPP teams. I couldn't even fathom using Gibson on any of them. Now, all that said, sometimes the context of the slate makes it okay to take on some thin spots, cheap guys with pass catching projections. But I think that this specific Gibson one was bad considering we had Boston Scott, we had Josh Jacobs, we had Kamara, we had Dalvin Cook, we had Christian McCaffrey, all in good spots on the slate. So in my cash lineup, which by the way, you can read the review of my cash lineup for free every week, goes up on Mondays, win or lose. The last decision I made in my cash lineup was a 2v2. It was Gibson and Julio Jones versus Josh Jacobs and Deshaun Jackson. And decided to go with the Julio side mainly because I really like this spot for the Atlanta pass game. Could project so much time for Matt Ryan as we talked about all last week and project them to be so pass heavy. And also because I didn't want more Philly, aka, more Deshaun Jackson when I already had Boston Scott in what I thought was a spot Philly's offense would really struggle. But yeah, there were other ways to go. I could have come off Herndon for Logan Thomas, played Marquise, Hollywood, and gotten up from Gibson to Jacobs. There's always going to be things like that in hindsight that seem better. Speaking of Washington, I personally think if you didn't play the Washington D/ST in cash, you made a pretty bad mistake. Eagles missing Lane Johnson, Audrey Dillard, Brandon Brooks, missing Miles Sanders. Jalen Reagor comes in banged up against a legit top 5 pass rushing unit at stone minimum 2K. I mean, I don't think we need to know anymore, right? That's just like full-blown pants-off intercourse spot. And, they got 15 DraftKings points, but they could have had more. They could have had a lot more. They failed to fall on a fumble. They had a shot at a pick 6, but got barely tackled. So yeah, if you didn't at least think long and hard about Washington D/ST, I think you need to rethink your defense process. As for other ways, to save money in a lineup construction like we had in week 1, longtime listeners, longtime readers of the cash lineup review article know I'm typically paying down at tight end on DraftKings specifically. Not necessarily on FanDuel, but on DraftKings specifically. And part of it is about how DraftKings sets up the salary structure at the tight end position. They simply don't leave viable plays anymore at wide receiver or running back around 3K. There's no wideouts we can project for 7 targets at 3,300. It just doesn't happen hardly ever. But they do it at tight end all the time. I mean, Logan Thomas, aka LT3, Chris Herndon, Jack Doyle, Ian Thomas. Those are examples from week 1. Like, guys, they're going to get 6-7 targets in around 3K. But the other thing about paying down at tight end is that there's not nearly as much opportunity cost. Like, the position as a whole is way more touchdown dependent, aka more variance. So, like, yeah, I'm willing to, I'm okay not having Ertz or Andrews or Kittle. I'm just never that scared of a tight end fade in cash. So as a whole, I think a pretty good week for me. 73rd percentile lineup, always good to start the year solidly. I did get a question from Spencer. He said, I played Cam Newton in cash. What made you keep Cam out of your cash pool? Yeah, so I know that Wiggins and Evan loved Cam. I just personally didn't see how he could possibly be better than Josh Allen in this spot. Way worse weapons. Cam declining in athleticism and Josh Allen ascending in athleticism. Cam coming off foot and shoulder injuries, new scheme, lack of continuity. I really, really didn't like Cam. And I guess I was proved wrong as he just went nuts on the ground. But I still think it was the right move. And also, New England played so slow. Like, we didn't know how they'd play. Like, we had a really good idea of how Josh Allen and the Bills were going to play and the spot they were in. Oh, also, by the way, every year at this time, I get so many questions along the same tone. How many lineups do you play in cash? Do you play one lineup in every contest? Like, people don't believe me. They're like flabbergasted no matter how many times I say it. Yes, I take one cash lineup and play it in as many cash games as I can. I believe on Sunday I was in 210 head-to-heads at various buy-in levels and like 500 games total with the same lineup. I may have condom intercourse, as I talked about last week, but I really do believe in zero condom DFS cash play. No, but seriously, there's other ways to reduce your variance in cash. You play more head-to-head so you don't have a binary outcome like you would in double-ups. Play more slates. Those are two easy options right there to quote-unquote hedge a little bit. All right, let's get to tournaments. As I mentioned, I made 10 tournament teams, none of which outscored my cash lineup. I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me. It's so fucking tilting. I'll start with a surprise to me, and that was the ownership on Austin Eckler. I mean, I was shocked, just absolutely floored that he was 20.5% owned in the $100 Millie Maker, the 4th highest owned player on the slate. Like, I just don't get it. Like, outrageous offensive line problems for the Chargers, as Brandon Thorne highlighted in his article on the site. Really strong defensive line for the Bengals. Austin Eckler is breaking in a new quarterback who is far worse for Austin Eckler's skill set in Tyrod Taylor. Game projected to play really slow, as Pat Thorman highlighted in snaps and pace. So I played Eckler some in tournaments because I thought he'd be a bit contrarian. But man, that was a mistake by me in ownership projection. I had him in the 10 to 12% range. If you would have told me 20.5% on Eckler, there's just no way I would have played him. I think one thing that I do in GPPs that I know is bad, but a lot of times I just can't help it, especially at wide receiver, is just like not play any of the best plays. Like Davante Adams at 25%. I knew he'd be around that highly owned. I knew he was one of the best plays. I just end up with none of him in my GPP lineups, and that's not right. We know from the Millie Maker article we can play high-owned guys, and we should play high-owned guys. We just need to keep an eye on cumulative ownership. My best GPP team of the week was a Russ stack. Russ Wilson, Lockett, Metcalf, Ridley. So double stack with Russ, bring it back with Ridley. I knew that those guys would be moderately owned and they were pretty expensive. So I wanted to save money at tight end. And so by playing Logan Thomas, I accomplished that. I saved money at 2,800. I also gained leverage on people who played Antonio Gibson, who I expected to be pretty highly owned. And then at the running back, I tried to jam in 3 out of my really tight pool, just kind of random. This lineup ended up with Dalvin Cook, Boston Scott, and Eckler, unfortunately. Could have been Jacobs or Kamara. Just as easily, would have been better, of course. But yeah, nothing great. Cash team scored more, of course. As for what we needed to actually win GPPs this week, I'm going to look at the $150 buy-in power sweep on DraftKings because I think that's a more realistic tournament. Still reasonably large field, 3,700 entries, but it's not like a Millie Maker where you need the actual stones to win. In first place in the $150 power sweep was Jay Merson 1. He had Lamar Jackson at 17%, Mark Andrews at 10%. Did not bring it back with anyone on Cleveland, did not play Hollywood Brown. Running backs were Jacobs, Gibson, and Raheem Mostert. Cash types, especially with the whole Tevin Coleman situation, we could project him for far fewer snaps due to the air quality and his condition. So Jacobs, Gibson, Mostert, and although I already gave my take on Gibson, and then wide receivers, he played Davante Adams, Calvin Ridley, and saved money with Paris Campbell at 2.4%. And, I thought about Paris Campbell at 3,900, thought about putting him in the cheap wide receiver options. We just didn't know Paris Campbell's exact role. But that's kind of was my point before this year about this week 1 stuff. Like, we didn't know, would it be Pittman or Pascal or Paris play every snap? Now we know, like, the cat is out of the bag. Like Paris Campbell has a near every down role as a slot receiver. The cat is out of the bag on Washington's defense, So we know so much more in week 2 than we did in week 1. But anyways, yeah, good stuff by Jay Merson. Congrats, 100K win, easy game. And some of the larger field stuff, what you needed to win was the Davante Adams, Adam Thielen correlation. And I can see how people got there. Like, I didn't get there, but I can see how people got there. I really can. I mean, 2 of the best players on the slate were for sure Davante Adams and Adam Thielen, right? Like, we talked all offseason about how much of a layup Adam Thielen was in the 3rd round of season long. It's like they're playing each other. They play wide receiver who correlate, wide receiver 1, opposing wide receiver 1 correlates really well. Why not make a GPP team with them? You also needed Lazard or MVS in there. We knew Lazard would play a ton. We knew MVS would as well. And the target concentration on both teams just so tight. So yeah, in hindsight, it makes sense. And you can also, with that stuff, see the value of bringbacks. Of course, most of the time, bringbacks are going to flame out. Like, I had Lamar, Hollywood, Andrews with Odell, and, it flames out a lot. But when it does work, it's what you need to get to the actual top of the super large stuff. So like you're going to brick out. But if you want to get first, I think the bringbacks, as we talked about with Dink and Leone, as we talked about in the Millie Maker Trends article, the large field stuff is going to be important. Green Bay takes a big lead, then Thielen starts going yam, Okay, enough with the football talk. Let's get to everybody's favorite portion of the program, the listener questions. Producer Luke, hit the theme music. Okay, got a ton of good questions. Going to do a 6-pack of them today. Number 1 comes from Raul. He says, not really a question, but I got woken up in that special way by my fiance this morning. Yeah, wow. Nice, man. Shout out to you, Raul. Congrats on the sex. I will say this about morning intercourse. Like, you're going to want to get it in now, Raul. I think someone said, or there's some saying, like, the greatest luxury in life is waking up without an alarm, which I don't really agree with. I actually like getting up early, but regardless, like, I have not needed an alarm in 5 years because my kids wake me up every morning at like 5:45 or 6 o'clock without fail. So like, there's no hashtag team in the morning. So, anymore. So shout out to you, Raul. Question 2 from Matt Moore. He says, without giving away any company secrets, what are the basics of developing ownership projections? Yeah, so there's a little bit of math and parameters that go into it, but basically it's me understanding what people are attracted to, what projection models say, what influential people are saying, understanding lineup construction. So for example, once Boston Scott came open on Saturday, I bumped down Antonio Gibson because obviously people are going to play Scott as a cheap running back and few are going to play Gibson. Bumped up some more of the expensive guys. And once you bump up someone like Lamar, you have to, because there's more salary out there, you have to give a little bit of a boost to Hollywood and to Andrews as well, since so much of the field is stacking. But yeah, I know a lot of others have tried to automate projecting ownership. I honestly don't see how that can work well. Like, there's just a lot of feel and a lot of things I think you gain by playing so much and by making lineups. And I think me doing it the way I'm doing it is the best way. And it's manual and it takes a ton of time, but I also think it's important. So yeah. Question 3 from John Evans. He says, who retires first, Frank Gore or Tom Brady? And why does Gore open up at minus 125? Yeah, good question, John Evans. I mean, the Brady stuff is so funny to me. Like, I know he's great and all, or I know he was great and all, but he's 43 years old. He was in the same system with a ton of continuity for 20 years. Now you drop him into a new place, new system, ask him to run a vertical offense at age 43. And like, he's playing the Saints with Mike Evans banged up. Like, I get it. Like, it's tough, but like, no one even questioned Brady all off season. I just don't understand. Like the rates that people were using on Godwin and Evans and saying that Brady would slide in and have them sustain those rates is just insane to me. Like during the bust pod, I talked about Godwin and how I thought Godwin would be a bust this year, and people thought I was just insane. And maybe I will be, like I said, the Saints are going to have a really excellent defense this year. So maybe Brady will come out and end up being fine, but I'm just skeptical. To answer your question, though, the funny thing is that Le'Veon Bell and Michael Pirine are both hurt right now. So Frank Gore is actually going to be featured in the year of our Lord 2020. It's just so wild. I think this has to be Gore's last year, though. Like Brady can probably hang on as long as this season doesn't go completely off the rails, but this has to be Gore's last season. All right, question 4 from Stephen Arnold. He says, why are you moving to Colorado? Yeah, it's kind of a complicated answer, Stephen. The bottom line is that we have always thought that living somewhere else, not the East Coast is quote unquote right. And that's nothing against the East Coast, really. Like I've spent the first 37 years of my life here. I grew up in DC area. In Virginia, I've been in Philadelphia the last 16 years. But man, I think you can make a case that the East Coast has the worst weather in the country. It's like so unbearably hot and humid in the summer, like so cold and bitter and depressing in the winter. And it's also one of the most expensive places in the country. And generally speaking, I don't know, but I think in my experience from traveling a decent amount that like the baseline attitude and demeanor of people in the East Coast is just like angry and kind of mean, not peace and love. On top of that, I would say that like as I've gotten older and like going through a full-blown MLC, midlife crisis, like I found that my happiness correlates more directly with nature, just being outside and experiencing unique things in unique areas. So all these things, weather, nature, cost of living, temperament of people, we just think that it's right for us to be somewhere else out west to raise the kids and really just for us to live. I'd also add though that we don't know for sure, right? Like we think that living out west is better, but we've never done it before. So we don't know for sure. There's just no way to know. I don't think you can really know until you do it. But I really didn't want to like live here on the East Coast forever with this feeling that maybe we aren't living in the best place for us. We at least have to find out, and if we hate it out in Denver, we can always come back. So yeah, it's scary for sure, man. I mean, we're leaving our family and our friends and our entire life. We don't know a ton of people out in Colorado at all. But I think if you never do anything new, like anything scary in life, well, that's probably not the fullest life. So yeah, we'll see, man. I'm excited though. Excited for sure. Won't be leaving until after the NFL season. So still some time. Question 5 comes from Hen Diddy. He says, do you use an optimizer to build your lineups? Or do you feel it's necessary if you're not MMEing? By the way, love your content. Appreciate it, Hen Diddy. I do not use an optimizer. So I have this battle so much with Taylor and Andrew and Dink and Leone and everyone pretty much that's playing high stakes. And my point is an optimizer is based on projections. And projections are based on assumptions such as, let's say one of the assumptions is Antonio Gibson in week 1 will see 17% of Washington's targets. Now people take that assumption, that guess, and it's a guess. It's an educated guess, but it's a guess, but they take it as data. It is not data. So what we have is this singular number, which isn't really accurate, right? Like I could have seen Antonio Gibson getting anywhere from 3% to 25% of Washington's targets, but we have to come up with a single number for the optimizer. And I understand that, as someone who has worked on the projections, as someone who knows that Alvin Kamara's 20% target rate is much more solid, much tighter than Gibson's projected target rate. But the optimizer doesn't know that. I know that. So I am happy to play cash against any optimizer lineup anytime in NFL. I mean, the bottom line is IKB. I know better. And I know that sounds super arrogant, but it is what it is. And I really think that most of you listening understand the range of players, the fragility on guys, the right way to construct a lineup better than an optimizer can. Now, there are 2 ways I do and would use an optimizer. The first is MME, making 30 or more lineups to put in a large field GPP. And people who are good at this, like Dink and like Leone and some of the MME guys are going to show really, really good returns doing this. In the large field GPPs, you're playing against the weakest competition. When you can play well using an optimizer MME like that, like Dink has talked about so much on the pods and everything in the Saturday show and in his articles, you can have a far better ROI than I can generate playing cash, and it's way more scalable. The second way I would consider using an optimizer is to look at maybe 10 quote unquote optimal lineups. Take a projection system you trust. For me, of course, it's ours because I'm working on it. And look at the top 10 lineups and projected points. There might be something there that I didn't see. I remember one time a couple years ago, I just didn't see an obvious 2v2 and I didn't play Christian McCaffrey at like 6,400. I mean, it was just egregious, like inexcusable. But if I had run the top 10 lineups, I would have seen it. So yeah, if you're interested in the optimizer, we have the deal with Fantasy Lab, special deal for ETR people. Head to the site in the DFS dropdown and find out more there. You can get their optimizer preloaded with our projections, my ownership projections. All right, question 6 comes from David Milley. He says, last question we're going to do today. He says, is 2, 3, or 4 beers optimal for a night of team sex? Is the team accounting for alcohol percentages, certain beers with certain hops? D Milley out. Yeah, it's crazy. The R&D team here at Gender Labs LLC, aka Gender Consultants, has put an incredible amount of time and money behind this question. I can't tell you how many of our research mice have perished doing the truly honorable task of seeing exactly how much alcohol is required for peak performance. So the key way I think that we've found to think about this is a tipping point, right? Like your launch angle gets stronger and stronger through alcohol up to a certain point. It's linear. But then there's a point where it just all goes to hell and your launch angle gets all screwed up. Now, it's tricky. A lot depends on your weight and your alcohol tolerance. And that's where our proprietary POE model comes in, pumps over expectation. I can't release the exact findings of that model here, but I will give you guys a true key, a bonus key, because I really do care about you and all of your gender consulting needs. A lot of people think that it's about alcohol. That's wrong. And a lot of people think that it's optimal to smoke after the intercourse. That's also wrong. Our research has actually found that it's GTO to smoke right beforehand, like maybe 2 to 3 minutes before. If you can raise your POE by at least 50%, guaranteed. Okay, that is going to do it for this edition of the Solo Pod. We will be back with Silva for team by team recaps. AFC will be free on this feed and the NFC will be in the premium feed. If you guys are subscribers, you don't have the premium feed yet, please go to the RSS instructions in the About dropdown. So, for Jerry, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.